All right, we'll call this Planning Commission meeting of May 29th to order. Our first item would be approval of the minutes of the regular Planning Commission from April 23rd. Do we have a motion?
A motion to approve the minutes?
Yes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. The opportunity for citizens to address the commission for items that are not on the agenda. So we'll have time for the public hearing for Linnell Garden and today, but if you have anything not on the agenda, this will be your time to speak on it. Okay. Next will be approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. So our first item is a public hearing to consider a variety of land use requests related to a proposal to construct condominiums, townhomes, and apartments on the northern portion of the former Lindale Garden Center property and an adjacent single-family property. Staff.
Thank you. The Lindale Garden Center closed its doors in 2006. The property was purchased by the Cornerstone Group in 2011, and an overall development plan including 151 apartments, a grocery store, 11,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space, outdoor activity spaces was approved by the City Council in March of 2013. The Lake Winds Co-op opened for business in 2014 on the south half of the site, but plans for the housing and additional retail space stalled at that time, and those approvals have since expired. The Cornerstone Group has continued to work on the project, completing shoreline improvements last year, and are now moving forward with partner North Bay companies to redevelop the northern portion of the site with a variety of housing types. In addition to the former Lindale Garden Center land, the Cornerstone Group has purchased one single-family home to the north at 6328 Aldrich Avenue. This property is proposed to be rezoned and included in the overall development. The current proposal includes 30 for-sale townhomes along the shoreline of Richfield Lake, 8 rental townhomes, and 66 apartments in a 4-story building adjacent to Lindale Avenue. I do want to note that the staff report said that was a 3-story building. The condominiums at Richfield Lake are 3 stories. The apartment building on Lindale is 4 stories. Parking for the condominiums will be provided underground and in an accessory garage building that takes advantage of the elevation change north of the property. Parking for the townhomes and the apartments will be provided in a parking podium that occupies approximately 2/3 of the street level of the apartment building and in a surface lot. Along Lindale Avenue, the street level of the apartment building includes common areas and walkout units. The proposed density of the project is lower than what was originally proposed on the site and is lower than currently permitted by the comprehensive plan. However, the draft comprehensive plan, Richfield 2040, calls for allowing lower densities at the edges of Richfield's downtown mixed-use district, where lower densities could transition to the adjacent single-family neighborhood. The proposed 33 units per acre of this development fits within that proposed transitional density range, and the developers have requested an amendment to allow that density at this time rather than waiting for the final approval of the comp plan this fall. Parking for the apartment and townhome portion of the project is provided at a lower ratio than normally allowed. North Bay has submitted a statement in support of the proposed parking ratio, indicating that the proposal includes 2 spaces for each townhome and 1 for each apartment unit. North Bay believes that the studio units of the apartment building will be almost entirely occupied by a single person, and then in some cases these residents may not own a car at all. Additionally, the future retail development to the south will provide some additional overflow parking for the entire development. Retail parking will not be constructed until the plans for a retail development have been approved. The proposed project meets a number of goals of the comprehensive plan and the vision that the community has had for this area. The project diversifies Richfield's housing offerings, improves the Lindale Avenue gateway to the community, takes full advantage of the amenity of Richfield Lake, provides quality open space and public art, and minimizes the need for vehicle use by providing housing immediately adjacent to recreation and grocery uses. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project. So that concludes the staff report. The applicant, the Cornerstone Group, and their team are here to answer any questions you may have as well. Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the commission for staff before we hear from the applicants? Okay. Would the applicants like to come forward? I don't know if you want to do it together or separately.
My name's Colleen Carey, and I'm the president of the Cornerstone Group. And we're the lead developer of this site, and I think you've seen me here before many times. We feel like we've kind of got a package put together that is going to make sense for the city and for this location. And we're excited to answer questions about it. The team that we have with us today is Patrick McGlynn down on the end and Dan Oberpriller. Dan is with North Bay. Patrick is with McGlynn Partners. And those two guys are part of the development team that's working on the apartments. And next to them is Scott Nelson, their architect from DJR. Next to him is Terry Cermak, who is our architect with Cermak Roads. Lawrence Black, who you may have met, the project manager from the Cornerstone Group, and Ben Ford, who is our civil engineer. So I think this whole concept really does fit our original vision for creating some more vitality and bringing in a mix of uses. And with the Lake Winds retail plus the new retail that we're planning to bring in, and the apartments and the townhouses that the apartment developers are going to be doing, and then the condo project that we'll be doing, it's quite a mix of different kinds of housing types that haven't been available in Richfield. So I think we're all excited and looking forward to moving things forward, and I'm just here to answer questions, and the team is available as well. So can I answer questions for you?
And so will we be hearing from the apartment developer as well?
Yeah.
So
I think that the best thing probably would be for you to ask questions of me of the general site, okay, and the condos and the retail, and then the apartment project those guys can answer the questions, okay, for them.
Thank you.
Does that work?
Yeah. Any questions? So overall or about the condo project?
I have one question. Yes. The project won't affect any of the public access to the lake, will it?
No, it won't. Okay. We've already put the public access in as part of the previous work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Carey?
Well, so I guess maybe you know everything you need to know, but we feel like the 30-unit project with these $425,000 to $650,000 condos will be a great addition to this market. We think that this 3-story stuff down by the lake is going to offer lots of beautiful views and a nice product. And the apartments on the other end of the site, on the Lindale side, will create a little bit of a buffer between us and the condo project and the Lindale Avenue busyness, and also provide yet another housing type. So maybe you have questions about how it all fits together.
I have a question. Last time you were here, you said you had an open house and had quite a bit of interest. How's the interest or deposits? How have they gone since then? The interest has been strong. We have 5 or 6 reservations now. I believe our real estate agent was taking another one today. So we have a variety of different units that have been reserved, or people that have put their name on the list in anticipation of a particular unit size, and they're sort of across the board. We will be opening a sales trailer in the next couple of weeks on the site, where the retail is ultimately going to be. There's going to be a sales trailer, and so we'll start taking purchase agreements. Right now, we have our reservations. We've had 3 open houses, probably 50 people at each one. Lots of interest, and now it's on Zillow, and there's a website, and lots of interest. So we're feeling pretty confident about the demand. Because I believe you had to reach a certain level before you could start building. Right. Have you reached that?
No. Okay. In fact, the reservations don't count towards that at all. So we have to be in a position to sign a purchase agreement, which is in order to do that, we need condo docs, firm construction pricing, and just some button-down information on the finishes for the units, and we're working on that right now. And so I think by the end of, sometime in June, we'll be ready to sign purchase agreements. And still on track, we hope, for fall construction start.
Other questions about the condo project? I just have one sort of comment overall about the site and the way it's really, I guess, about the apartment component, but it pertains to access to your half of the site is there doesn't seem to be great access for pedestrians from Lindale coming from the north. It seems that to take the pedestrian path around, you have to go around 3 sides of the apartment building or walk through the drive aisle of the apartment complex. Could you talk about why there isn't any pedestrian access on the north part of the site? From Lindale, that would be.
Well, we felt like the pedestrian access that we wanted to create was to take people down to the amphitheater rather than to take pedestrians down to the condo project. And so the primary pedestrian access point is the one that runs between the retail and the apartments. So if you're coming down Lindale and you want to go to the site, most likely, unless you're going to the condo, to visit someone in the condos, you're mostly going to the amphitheater, and then there's a bridge that connects to the lake right there. So we just felt like that was the place that made most sense, and otherwise they're going to be walking through the backyards of the condos to get to the lake, and so that was our thinking.
That was more from the perspective of the condo owners and visitors. If they wanted to get to Lindale, it seems uncomfortable that they would have to walk in the drive aisle of the apartment building, but it's a minor detail. The other thing I was just curious about is the row of garages. It's not something that you see a lot anymore in multifamily development, and I'm just curious how that came to be and how much parking per unit is there in the condo part of it?
So we have a total of 63 parking spaces underground and above ground. And what we ended up with this building was 1.5 spaces per unit underground, which we actually think is sufficient for the market that we're going for. However, we wanted to have the option for some extra capacity. We had this extra lot that we had purchased, and what we want to be able to do is offer people the opportunity to have a workshop or use it as for storage or for to park their boat or an RV or something that's not going to fit in the underground garage.
Okay.
So those 8 spaces, those 8 parking garages, actually will only build as many as we get demand for. And so that's the thinking on it. It's a little bit different product. Like people could upgrade it and have a furnace in it and have it and use it as a shop.
And do people purchase that spot when they purchase the unit, or is it rented from the association sort of flexibly?
No, we'll only build them for people who purchase them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to talk to the apartment developer?
Yes,
Okay.
I think so.
Dan, do you want to come up?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. Great day. I know everybody's busy. I'm Danny Overperler. I'm principal at North Bay Companies. We are traditionally a Minneapolis-based residential developer, and we're excited to be here in Richfield. I understand, I used to work at Lindale Gardens, so it's close and near dear to me, and I know exactly what's underneath the ground. But we have Scott Nelson here from DJR to kind of walk through the plan with you and answer any questions from an architecture standpoint, and then I can answer any questions from a deal standpoint. You want, or would you like to ask questions of me now?
Why don't we refer questions to you, and if you need somebody else to answer them,
Okay.
you can defer.
Perfect.
So do we have questions for the applicant about the apartment project? Really? All right. Okay. My only question is just a big picture. The site does not contain as much housing as it once was proposed to. That has to do with a lot of things which are explained nicely in the packet and from the letter from Cornerstone. But I guess I'm curious, as it pertains to your building, why isn't it a story taller? That seems like it would be a better match to the density that surrounds it.
Sure. Bigger is not always better. I'm looking for success. So we're looking to create a market in Richfield rather than it's not an established market per se from a comp level perspective. You can put a 5th story on it, but that would skew the parking. It would be very hard to keep the prices of where they are and what they need to be from a comp set in Richfield and get financed if I did an underground basement with this type of product. The average square size of the unit is about 467. So we do think it is single occupancy for the product type that's in the apartment building. But it's just more or less of a stepping stone to provide a pathway for Richfield to succeed in better, higher and better housing,
Okay.
while retaining a really rich look.
Yeah.
And not sacrificing the exterior quality, meeting the demand as much as we can in terms of, or the guidelines in the comp plan, and making the accesses usable.
Cool. And I got to say, I think the frontage on Lindale is terrific. That's what I think one of the best parts of that. It is both having a main entrance for all residents and having those individual stoops is a really nice feature. I was also curious about the parking setup here. Are those spaces rented separately from the unit, or are they bundled?
So correct. I mean, obviously, Lindale, it's got a, high transportation bus along 35W there. So I think the actual location of it is good. And it will be very good someday. We have 64 units in the apartment building and 8 townhomes. We can assign 2 spots to every townhome and 1-to-1 in the apartment building. Typically, what we're seeing is a parking ratio in Minneapolis of about 0.3 to 0.5. Now, understanding that we're not there and understanding that the transportation isn't as good as some of the urban infill locations, I expect to see probably about 15% of the people in the apartment building not to have a car. So I'm actually very comfortable in terms of the parking ratio that we're providing, and they will be assigned spots that will be outside of the rent, and I think we can allocate some for visitors.
Okay.
I do have a question.
Okay, Commissioner Hoberg?
Excuse me, thank you. Can you talk about what the rents will be per unit approximately?
Sure.
And then is there any, a follow-up to that, is there any plan to have any units made affordable in this project at all?
So sure, I mean, everybody talks about affordable housing, and I think the clarification there is we will meet about it, but I'm trying to get a project done in a timeline that's acceptable. And obviously, this isn't a 4 or 9% tax credit deal at this point, and it can stand on its own 2 feet. And I think that's where the biggest win for Richfield is, to get progress going on the direction of Lindale, especially when you have all the important, you have more important stuff up front. So the chunk rent, we're looking at doing at 467 square feet. I'm trying to bring chunk rent under $1,000 for a unit. So you're sitting probably about $225 to $245 a square foot, which brings rent about in the $1,000 range. And that's what really needs to comp. So a lot of times what's happened in the last 5 projects, because I also had this land under contract, or was looking at it about 5 years ago, the buildings were too expensive for the area, and the gap wasn't big enough for most projects to get financed. So I'm just trying to really focus on success on the stepping stone. So once, I believe once this happens, it'll be a lot.
Well, I do like the fact that it is giving Richfield a different kind of option for housing in this community than we currently have. So, I mean, that's great.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission for the applicant?
One comment is there are 10-foot ceilings, and those windows are 8 feet tall, so it's very light and airy. So in terms of the size-wise, the height, I think we're sitting at, 50-some feet? A little under about 50 feet, so it will seem tall.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll now open the public hearing. If there's any members of the public who would like to comment on this proposal. All right, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
All right, public hearing is closed. So do we have any additional questions for staff, or is somebody prepared to make a motion on this item? Do we have a second for that motion? Second. Any discussion? I do just want to say I'm disappointed to have to do this one step. I do think in the context of what we've done elsewhere in the downtown area, we could have more, but I also very much believe that this project has had several false starts, and I am supportive of it moving forward. So I support this. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Do we have a motion for the second item?
6328 Aldridge Avenue as a planned mixed use.
Do we have a second? All right, any discussion of this item? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Third item, do we have a motion?
I will move to recommend approval of a resolution approving conditional use permit and final development plans for a planned unit development on lots 1 and 2, Block 1, Lindell Gardens, second edition.
Do we have a second? Any discussion of this item? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. So our next item will be to continue a public hearing to consider final development plans and a conditional use permit for a planned unit development of an elementary school at 6500 Nicollet Avenue. Thank you. Staff?
Thank you. So the applicant on this Partnership Academy has submitted an application for a planned unit development amendment on this, to build a new elementary school on the site. And the applicant has requested additional time to prepare and finalize their development plans. And this item is expected to come before the Planning Commission next month. So we just need a motion to continue the public hearing since the legal notice was published in the Sun Current.
Would anybody like to make that motion?
I motion to continue the public hearing related to the final development plans and conditional use permit to allow the planned unit development for the elementary school at 6500 Nicollet Avenue to June 25th, 2018.
We have a second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. All right, so now we are going to be going back to old business, resuming consideration of a variety of land use approvals related to a proposal for mixed-use development at 101 66th Street East. So we are midway through where we started last time, but I'm assuming staff will be able to give us an update on what's happened since our last meeting.
Yes, and I apologize for the amount of echo we're getting on this. As distracting as it is to listen to, it's impossible to read and hear yourself with that much echo. But I think this might be a little better. All right, so the developer submitted an application for a planned unit development that includes a 3-story mixed-use building with 31 residential units and approximately 6,000 square feet of commercial space. The proposed development provides active building uses and pedestrian emphasis along 66th Street. The site is adjacent to the large commercial area centered on Nicollet Avenue and 66th Street, with low-density residential properties located to the south and to the east. Along with the application for planned unit development, the developer also applied to amend the comprehensive plan designation of the property to mixed use. A public hearing for these applications was held at the Planning Commission meeting on April 23rd, and the Planning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend amending the comprehensive plan. On May 22nd, the City Council voted unanimously to amend the comprehensive plan designation of the property to mixed use, and now approved by the City Council, that comprehensive plan amendment will be submitted to the Metropolitan Council for a 30-day review period, after which time that amendment will be effective. Following the April 23rd public hearing testimony, the Planning Commission voted to table consideration of the PUD and rezoning applications to this meeting. Since this time, the developer has hosted an additional open house meeting on May 14th. And based on feedback from the open house meetings and from last month's public hearing, the developer has provided a letter, which is attached to this report, summarizing the plan changes and responding to other comments they had received. The plans have been updated to include additional landscaping along the eastern perimeter of the site, as well as changing previously there was a water retention pond, which has been changed instead to a raised berm to block headlights from shining to the south. Landscaping will be placed atop the berm to provide additional screening height. And the developer has also shifted the entrance to the underground parking back from the intersection of Stevens and 66th Street as requested. Regarding the concerns about additional traffic on Stevens Avenue, most traffic is expected to reach the development via 66th Street rather than coming from the south via First or Stevens Avenue, as those streets do not continue south of 68th Street, making cut-through neighborhood traffic increases unlikely. The developer is proposing signage and curb modifications to prohibit right turn exits from the property onto southbound Stevens Avenue. And then again, this is repeating some of what we went through last month, but the policies in the comprehensive plan that support this application include expanding the vision of the Lyndale and 66th area to include the hub and the Nicollet shops, promoting development that includes promoting development that broadens the tax base, encourage and support the development of strong commercial districts that respect the values and standards of citizens of Richfield, and encouraging the development of viable and responsive neighborhood commercial services. The proposed density of 31 units per acre is within the comprehensive plan guidance of 25 to 50 units per acre at the edges of the mixed-use district. And furthermore, the zoning ordinance states that when multifamily, office, retail are planned as part of a mixed-use development, that the less intensive uses be used as transitions to the adjacent residential. So by focusing that commercial activity at the west end of the building, the proposed building actually serves as a transition between the commercial area to the west and the residential areas to the south and east. Staff finds that the proposed project meets the policies and intent of the comprehensive plan and meets code requirements for mixed-use development, and staff recommends approval of the proposal. And that's it for the staff report. Representative for the applicant is here to answer any questions you may have as well. Thank you.
And I believe staff stated there was a member of the neighborhood who was prepared to make a statement on behalf of the group. Is that correct? Okay, so of course officially our public hearing has closed, so we won't have the general open thing, but if it's okay with the rest of the commission, I'd like to allow our representative to give us 5 minutes since there's been some additional activity.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
I'd like to hear from him.
Okay, please come forward. And if you could still state your name and address.
Hi, excuse me, allergy season, sorry. I'm Julie Lipinski. I live at 6621 Stevens Avenue South. And I'm here tonight to just talk to you a little bit about what's happened since the last meeting. As you know, thank you, by the way, for the opportunity to speak tonight. Last month, as you know, the approval of the zoning change and the plan unit development were tabled. And as Matt described, some activities have happened between now and then. The reason they were tabled was so that the developer would have time to work with the residents on their concerns about the proposed development. Those goals have not yet been achieved, so we ask that you deny the rezoning and PUD request this evening until meaningful progress has been made. As you heard last month, neighbors were stunned to hear that the project had been in the works for nearly 2 years when they just heard about it last month. This created a huge gap between the positions of the two parties, and perhaps more time and a different approach is needed to resolve the issues. The neighborhood had planned to have a meeting on May 14th that was to discuss the project, and at that time, Mr. Lynch had requested to have a meeting with the neighbors that same night, so we combined those two meetings. Neighbors viewed display boards, asked questions, and many shared their concerns at the meeting. Mr. Lynch suggested that if residents had pictures of buildings that they thought might be appropriate, that they send those to him. A written summary of the neighbors' feedback was sent to Mr. Lynch with a couple of pictures of the types of buildings that they thought would be appropriate fit for the site. And you probably have seen that in your packet. I think those are in there. There's a lot of language in the comprehensive plan about the size and scale of new developments being sensitive to the scale of existing development and providing transitions in scale. The neighborhood really agrees with those statements. In addition, the residential zoning code that states that traffic should be minimized within residential areas and that residential locations should be safe, attractive, and quiet really applies to this as well because it's right next to a residential area. In fact, it's surrounded on 3 sides by single-family homes. At this point, from the neighborhood's perspective, no significant changes have occurred to the plans, and the developer's responses do not address our major areas of concern related to the pressure a development of this size and type places on the surrounding residential neighborhood. A new development in this area has been mentioned will broaden the tax base for all of Richfield. We can achieve the goals of the comprehensive plan, increased revenue, and meet the goals of the neighborhood and the developer, but not if we allow this particular project. We're very interested in productive dialogue on this and realize there are many parties involved in this in addition to the developer who have interests, and we'd like a more effective format to work through the issues. For example, in tonight's packet, there are documents about what permitted uses the city would like to see, including a mixed-use neighborhood designation. And I think our neighborhood would agree if it is to be mixed use, the neighborhood designation seems most appropriate. But there's also the addition of Class 3 restaurants. Class 3 restaurants are fast food restaurants, and this would really bring high turnover and traffic patterns. And as you remember from all the testimony last month, there was a big concern about those 2 driveways coming out onto Stevens Avenue. When and how can we get together on these issues? Please deny the rezoning and the PUD this evening so that we can determine how to more effectively bring the parties together to create a win for all involved. On behalf of the neighborhood residents, thank you for hearing our concerns and your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And please, would the applicant like to make a statement?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ryan Anderson. I'm with ISG. I stood before you last month as we introduced the project. I want to apologize for Paul. He was delayed with this weather, with this flight getting in today. He tried getting an earlier flight. Was unable to make it, but I'll be presenting on his behalf today and can answer any questions you guys have. A few things I'd like to touch base on since we talked last was that we did have a second open house for this project for staff's recommendation and the residents' concern. We hosted this open house. We had very good turnout from the residents and even had some commissioners and councilors join as well. At this open house, we received a lot of feedback. We took this feedback back and we sat through and went through every comment and carefully considered each item and what items we felt we could address, which items we felt we can't address, and just putting together an overall document that outlined everything we went through. We provided that document with our resubmittal package, which I believe was given to you guys today in your staff report. I'm happy to speak on any specifics today in regards to the comments and our response if there's any questions on that. After a resubmittal, the City Council in the meantime has approved the comp plan amendment to change this guidance, the zoning guidance here to mixed use. This was approved unanimously by City Council, and following that up, we come back to you now with the rezoning of the property and the PUD for this project. In looking at the rezoning of this property, it follows the comp plan guidance. It follows a newly amended comp plan, as well as the upcoming comp plan, new comp plan, the city as a whole. This isn't by chance. If you look at the historical development patterns along 66th Street, this is just following development trends that have happened over the years as infill development is slowly taking place in Richfield and the Twin Cities Metro. If you look at the 66th Street development handout that the city staff has provided in your packet, this shows the overview of 66th Street and the amount of zoning that is not R1. And you'll see that though this project at a small scale seems to be a large change and maybe to some even out of place, when you take a step back and look at this project as a whole, up and down 66th Street, this is just the next spot that's furthering that connection from east to west of multi-residential and commercial properties on 66. Furthermore, this project, the rezoning, follows the market study guidance that has identified that multifamily is in need in Richfield and that small-scale retail is a potential option for this area as well. This market study shows that, also identified the, I guess, the history of this development along 66th, and has identified this as the potential of how this area is going to go. Slowly, it is switching from R1 to a mixed use, to a multifamily residential type of development along 66, which in hand goes with what the county has done to develop this and make it more of a busy corridor and provide the bike lanes, the walking paths, to provide this connectivity from the east side to the west side of Richfield. And this project falls hand in hand with that. So when you look at this as a whole and take a step back, you'll see that with the comp plan guidance, the historical development patterns, and the small market study that was done, the rezoning of this property falls in line with all of that. And then when you get down to the PUD, now the PUD for this project fits the rezoning, which, to follow back, fits the comp plan guidance. The PUD meets all ordinance requirements of the rezoning that we're asking you for, but with 3 exceptions. The 3 exceptions are the parking requirements, the buffer setbacks, and then the building setbacks. The biggest one that's been brought up is the parking requirement. We have identified I believe we're providing a ratio of 1.26 parking stalls per unit, and city code requirement is 1.5. Now, there's been a precedent set on other projects that the city has allowed projects to go down to a 1.25 parking stalls per unit, and those projects have been successful. And though right now we are proposing a 1.26 stalls per unit, which I believe should be allowed, it should be noted that the project as a whole, between the commercial retail and the residential, requires 69 parking stalls. This project as a whole is providing 71 parking stalls. Right now, that's being separated between the underground and the above ground. The underground typically being for the residential, the above ground being for the commercial. By not stating strictly on these plans that we are designating 12 stalls above ground for residential, allows us the flexibility in the future to adjust that as necessary. Maybe more above ground parking will be needed for commercial. Maybe on the flip side, maybe more parking will be needed for residential, and then design that way. Either way, as a whole, this project does meet city code requirements without an exception. It's when you break it down into 2 parts that you've got excess parking right now for commercial and less parking for residential, and that allows us the flexibility to adjust things. The second one is the buffer. On the southwest corner of our property, there's a 15-foot parking setback, which is to provide buffer between R1 zoning and commercial or multi-residential zone. Now, in one area, we're requesting this to be reduced to 10 feet, 11 inches, which the intent of the setback is to provide screening, a buffer yard to break up and provide that separation from the residential to the commercial, to the multifamily. Now, though we are requesting this, and it does meet the intent of the ordinance, we are providing 100% screening. There's an existing fence that will be fixed up and repaired with this project, as well as additional plantings providing meeting. I would like to point out as well that when this project first started, we were not asking for this setback. When this project started, the building and the parking all fit within the allotted setbacks, and then when the right-of-way acquisition took place with the 66th Street, some right-of-way was given to the county to make that happen, and this pushed our building farther south, which puts us over the setback. So though we are still meeting the intent of the ordinance, I just want to point out that this exception is being asked for as a result of that. It was not the intent. And the third thing, and this is a minor thing, but I think there's been maybe a little bit of misinformation on the maximum building setback not meeting those requirements. It sounds like we're pushing the building over building setbacks on the east and the west property line, and therefore building a building that's too big for the property. It should be noted, and some cities use the different wording, that this building setback is considered a build-to line. It's not stating that the building can't be within 15 feet of the property line on the front, the east, and the west side. It's that the building must be within 15 feet. In order for us to meet that on this property, because we have street frontage on the north side, the east, and the west side, we would have to build a building that would stretch the length of the block so that we would be within 15 feet of the property line on both sides. Obviously, that is not our intent. I don't believe that's anyone's intent, but because of the uniqueness of this property of having street frontage on all three sides with the lots combined, that is what the code requires. So that is why we're asking for that exception. So we do not have to build a building that is within 15 feet of all three property lines. So I guess to recap, this project, though we've heard a lot about this project's too big, the building's too big, it doesn't meet the zoning. We're asking for a lot of exceptions, variances. Those are the three items that do not meet code as written. And we feel that there's slight tweaks, slight modifications, which is why PUDs were created in order to make unique properties and unique projects fit within code requirements. The last thing I'd like to talk about is traffic. Traffic's obviously a big concern, and understandable, so I am concerned on that. The two things I would like to mention is that one number that was thrown out there at the first meeting, which I think really put a lot of concern into the residents, was that the ITE trip generation manual said that for this project, there'd be a total peak hour generation of 91. And that is the number we come up with when you run the project through one model. And though this number may be accurate, there's another way of running at the model as well. The ITE trip generation manual version 10 has a specific, a trip generator for a mid-level residential building with first-story commercial, which this project fits the whole. Now, there's not been as many studies on this because this is a newer generator. But when you put this project in, because it always takes into account that a mixed-use building is going to be in a more urban setting, that the trip generator only generates 27 peak hour trips. Now, I don't want to claim that this project is only going to generate 27 trips for its peak hour, but I also don't feel that it's necessary to just automatically assume it's going to generate 91 trips in its peak hour. The IT manual talks about reductions for projects when you take into the overall site. And a couple of things to bring up here that specifically talked about is that with the 66th Street development, we're now going to have walking paths and dedicated protected bike lanes right in front of the property that allows for that type of transportation, as well as a bus system with a bus stop right across the corner from this property. So though one way of looking at this project generates 91 peak trips in an hour, another way of looking at it only generates 27. This project likely falls somewhere in between the two of them. I just wanted to point out that it's not safe to assume that it automatically is going to generate 91 trips an hour. And I guess finally, when looking at this project, I think it's safe to say that this property eventually is going to end up in some sort of multifamily commercial business. Property sat vacant for many years in a form of R1 and the church site. And it's been that way for a while, and it's unfortunately to some, it's not going to go back to R1 zoning. The market demand and now the comp plan guidance is not going to allow that this project go back. So taking a look at that, taking a look at this project meeting these zoning requirements, we feel this project is good as a whole. We understand the concerns, and I believe that Paul has went out of his way to meet with the residents, to try to make modifications to this project, to try to increase screening, to reduce access onto the site, to hear and meet the residents' requirements, but yet still going forward with the project that meets the city guidance, that meets the city code requirements, and ultimately, I believe, meets the long-term where this area is going. So if it isn't this project, it may be another one just like it without someone who's willing to put in the time and the effort, go through the steps, and meet with his residents. So I apologize for the lengthiness of that, but I just wanted to go through some of the points that I wanted to bring up in regards to the project, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or elaborate on anything else I said.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
how long do you think it's going to take for the trees on the south side of the parking lot to become mature? I'm not sure I'm real comfortable with the berm and trees being adequate between the apartment and their neighbors.
Sure.
I know I'm not.
No, I understood. So we plant two types of species of trees there. The biggest concern with the trees was that the house to the southeast of this property has second-story windows. Concerned about light and visibility into the units. So with that, an oak tree is proposed to be planted in front of that window. That'll provide the large screening, really get to that second-story window. Obviously, oak trees do take longer to grow. I won't want to give you a specific timeline because I'm not a landscape architect. I'm not a tree expert. I don't want to quote it incorrectly, but oaks do take a while to grow. So it will be planted at the largest size that you can safely plant an oak, at 3.5-inch caliber tree when it starts. But there's also different species of trees planted in that buffer yard that are designed to grow faster, that are designed to grow the more immediate screening. So it may be a little bit longer before some of that second-story window coverage is provided, but the low-level screening, the eye level, the headlight screening will be provided.
Did you look at anything like, those rock fences or anything like that could guarantee that light? Because I can see, sitting in your backyard and things like that with lights coming in, it would be probably kind of disturbing. But, like some of those rock fences on top of the berms, like what they're doing at Plaza 66, is very appealing and would maybe provide a buffer for the neighbors. I'm not sure trees would do it.
So, so we did go back and look at that as we had discussed at the open house. In my experience, the rock walls are taken two ways. Some people love them. Some people think they're giant baskets of rocks and don't enjoy them. But I understand the intent is to provide that full screening. The property to the southwest has a full fence currently that will be fixed up or reconstructed and does provide 100% screening. Currently, we are showing the earth berm, which will provide 100% screening, and as mentioned in the staff report, with the arborvitaes on that property, between that and the earth berm, I feel that is 100% screened already. But if it is necessary, I believe to provide that 100% screening to that property, fence would be more appropriate and truthfully a lot more cost effective than the rock, the rock gabion wall.
Chair Hayford-O'Leary,
Yeah.
Commissioner Rudolph, there is a condition, there's a new condition in the resolution that was added since last month, requiring the applicant to continue to discuss the landscape berm design, including the possibility of a fence, whether on top or in combination with the berm there, to fully screen the parking lot views to the south. And you mentioned the rock wall at the Plaza 66 project, and I think that was arrived at just by direct discussions between the developer and that adjacent property owner. And I think that's ideally that's what we'd like to see here too, is a direct one-on-one between the developer and that property owner to come to an agreement of what is going to fully screen that.
And if I could say one more item, we are certainly open to putting a fence there. And truthfully, I feel that with the arborvitaes as they are now and the earth berm landscaping, we are proposing 100% screening on that property. And if a fence, if the commissioners feel fence is more appropriate, we'll certainly add a fence to it. One thing I do warn about putting a fence in that area is that with an earth berm, the arborvitaes, trees, starts to get a little crowded. And to also meet some neighborhood concerns, we're proposing to use that area for snow storage as well. So we would have to find a way to place that fence in that area in a way that it won't restrict snow storage, but it would also provide screening, but yet not be pushed back far enough that it would shade the arborvitae. So again, we will make it happen if that is the commissioner's intent. That is some of the challenges we would face by to place a fence there.
I do have a question.
Yeah, Commissioner Ben.
So with the grading plan as it is, with the, it's like a 2 to 3 foot berm depending on where it is, and you have the existing arborvitaes that are kind of along the fence line right now. I haven't seen them in person. Do you know how tall those existing ones are? Are they like 10 feet, 15 feet? 8
Yeah,
feet?
I would say, I don't know if the residents are here to talk to it. I would say they're going to empty at the bottom.
Sounds like an arborvitae.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so, again, and it's.
But you said they're about 10 feet? Roughly? Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so the berm's going to come up. You're going to have these little guys that are probably about 6 feet tall that are going in. I mean, you could spade in bigger trees, I think, to get full coverage. I mean, but the arborvitaes and the spruce, I think they're about as thick and robust as you can get for screening without actually putting in a fence. I'm comfortable with the plant selection. I would like to see them as large as possible, but I did have a question about where they're placed for snow storage, for fences, maybe if fences were to come in play later. Is the swale on the back part of the property, is that necessary to maintain drainage between the neighbor's property and yours? Because it looks like the berm comes up and then it comes back down to their property line and there's like a swale that runs around the back corner. Is it possible to put that swale on the front side of the berm closer to the parking lot and you could push those trees further back maybe?
So it's good, it's best, I guess, engineering practice to capture all stormwater on site and not provide any runoff to neighbors. Though I feel if we did push the berm further back, it may have very little effect on the neighbors. But because that is an area of snow storage, I wouldn't want a year where maybe so much snow is piled up that it is, when it does melt, drains into the neighbor's yard, and not knowing the drainage characteristics, if it flows away, fine, or if it hits their house, it causes flooding or anything. So that drainage, swale, and catch basins put back there to prevent any runoff to the neighbor's property.
Okay, that's good, thanks.
Any other questions?
I have a question, both for Mr. Anderson and maybe staff, is some of these things that are being worked out, it's mentioned the developer would work out with the homeowner or the resident. How can, and the changes, all of the changes that have been made that Matt mentioned, is that a firm commitment somehow that these will happen if this is approved? And, any wiggle room, we don't want it necessarily just left up to the developer to work out with the homeowners later?
Yeah, we can certainly look to strengthen that language in the resolution. I can take a look at exactly how we arrived at that agreement for Plaza 66 between those neighbors, and we would look to, as this moves forward to City Council, we would look to strengthen that to include more firm language to make sure that something like that is included. Any further input?
I would say, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, that the stronger language you use, the more likelihood that it will be followed to the letter. On the other hand, if the language is too strong, it doesn't allow them flexibility to meet differing neighbors' requirements and requests. I think the rock wall at Plaza 66 is a great example. I've not heard anybody in the middle on that. People either love it or hate it. The neighbors immediately adjacent to Plaza 66, that's what they wanted. I wouldn't want to impose that on this neighborhood if that's not what they wanted. So it's just trying to strike a balance between flexibility while giving some firm direction.
Okay, and for example, like the pork chop that's going to be put into the southeast part of the parking lot, so to direct lights away from that one property on the east side, is that firmly going to be in the commitment? And the berm instead of the basin, is that all solid?
We can include the berm as a requirement. That was kind of a late change from the basin that was there before. But given that it's shown on plans, that is what we would expect to be billed. Not including that would, the screening would have to, the 100% screening would have to be accomplished in some other way, as they're not asking for an exception from the screening requirement, so that does have to be met one way or the other, whether it's a berm, a privacy fence, or a combination of both. Regarding the pork chop, that was something that was considered. So in terms of curb modifications, they are squaring off that corner on the no exit to Stevens Avenue. So there's a requirement that there's signage for no right turn exit onto Stevens Avenue. There's a requirement that the curb be modified so that it's not curved. It's a hard square, which in addition to the signage, should discourage those turns. The developer is not showing the pork chop, which would, I'll let the developer chime in on this as well, but it was basically found that the only movement that a pork chop would prevent would be a left turn in from Stevens Avenue or from the neighborhood. By putting that no exit, you're stopping the most troubles, the movement that was the most concern, which is people exiting and leaving through the neighborhood. By preventing that movement, the remaining movements that are allowed are coming from 66th Street, taking a right turn into the parking lot, and then any folks from the neighborhood, from Stevens Avenue, allowing that left turn in. It was found that by including that pork chop, you're only stopping that last movement from the neighborhood itself. And it was found that didn't actually, that wasn't anticipated to be a real source of trip generation. I'll defer to the applicant for anything further on that.
Yeah, what's shown on the plans now is what we are proposing. We're proposing an access that has left in, left out, right in capabilities, no right out. Therefore, not allowing traffic to exit the property to go south. Though the staff report did identify it, and we have stated before, we don't feel that the drivers or many people would have a desire to go south on Stevens, seeing that the main thoroughfare is 66, which is immediately adjacent to the property. But that being said, we did get rid of the curb radius and squared it up as shown and put a no right turn sign. You could further that and put in a curb modification to restrict that, but the only thing that truly restricts is left in. And in that case, anyone who is willing to drive the wrong way through a no right turn signage is probably willing to drive and do a little swerve to get around a curb. So that's our stance at this.
Thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner Quam or others?
Do you know, were there any other scheduled meetings between the residents and developers?
Yes, my understanding is that there's a hope to have a second or another work session in front of the City Council on May 12th. I believe at 5:45, at which time, the neighborhood would have an opportunity to basically bring the same concerns to the City Council that they've brought to you with their ongoing concerns with the development and give the developer another chance to address those.
John, just a question, just to clarify, is that locked in? That meeting? Just because I know we haven't been informed officially of the meeting. The residents do not feel that we're trying to push another meeting past that's locked in.
Did I say May? June 12th. I'm sorry. Yeah, June 12th is the date that's been discussed. That was discussed by the city manager with the neighborhood, I believe. And every indication I have is that it has been, is verified on the city side of things. I thought we had shared the date in a conference call with the developer. Is that your recollection, Matt? Yeah. So, if the developer is unable to attend that meeting, we'd probably need to figure that out tomorrow and make sure we come up with an alternate.
Any other questions for the applicant or general? Yeah, Commissioner Pinn?
I have a couple questions. So just to follow up on the elimination of the pork chop, or are there any other true traffic modifications in the street itself? Because right now you guys are posting a no right turn, and it's my understanding that this is just like, this is suggestion from whoever the property owner is. It's not an actual traffic change. Is that correct? Like according to Public Works and.
Stop signs are required at most parking where parking lot meets the right of way, and as to how, I couldn't answer the question of, are those enforceable by law? I don't know if you have any.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would imagine that traffic control signs, things like that are regulated by I would imagine a state code, and I would imagine that violating them carries the same weight whether it's on private or on public right of way.
But loosely followed nevertheless. But anyway, so I'm just asking. I just kind of want to frame a reference here, because I'm just curious: is Public Works part of the reason why this bump out hasn't occurred, or is this kind of recommendation by the developer? I'm just curious, like how just like a curb bump out is going to prevent turning in from that side as you're coming north on Stevens. Is that what you're suggesting? Like if the pork chop was there, it would make it more, I mean, because right now the pork chop is more like where it angles out with the turn to kind of direct the turn correctly.
So, I guess back a little bit. The technical term for pork chop is actually where you have a center island that looks like a pork chop that separates flow. In this case, if you were to restrict it further, you would pull the curb radius up the street. I guess, funneling almost, it looks like
Past the driveway.
Yeah,
Right.
that would force it up. So it'd be a rounded drive into the site.
And could traffic calming, it might be late in the process, but I just want to explore this, and could traffic redirection be achieved with, if you were to extend just the curb as a regular bump out like you see with tighter intersections where, they want to pull off traffic calming, where you choke down the intersection, and you choke it off at the south side of the driveway, where it's, you actually do have a real traffic change then, where it's the city saying, this is one way only through here. I don't know, I guess I'm just trying to.
So just to clarify,
Yeah.
are you talking about the traffic diverter choking off the traffic on Stevens itself or in the drive entrance?
On Stevens itself, so an
Yeah.
extension of the curb into Stevens Avenue.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know that the neighborhood has asked for that specifically. We could discuss that with Public Works. I think that's really more of a city issue than it is an issue for this developer, since it would be in the city right-of-way. That would keep neighbors from being able to go southbound past the entrance into their neighborhood.
And that was going to kind of be my follow-up to this, and is that choking off neighbor access to your own neighborhood anyway, too. So, I mean, it's you kind of, you gain one way and you lose the other. So, and so I guess my next question is, just in general, when you guys are going through this, was there a firm reason why this couldn't be all residential within that same building envelope, where it has, where you have this commercial component to it? I'm just kind of curious, exploring options and seeing how this had been explored in the past.
So generally, Paul's projects and histories done in the past have consisted of a commercial residential mix, and that is.
Excuse me, Mr. Anderson, could you get a little closer to the mic?
Sorry.
Having some
So,
hearing.
I guess that is the direction Paul wants to go, and what he thinks and what the small market plan has identified as a potential success. The small market plan has identified that neighborhood retail, small retail infill, is a viable option along this corridor. And through him and his side and his business plan, he's found that a small amount of commercial, in addition to the residential, is what he wanted to move forwards with. It meets, I guess, the zoning, what he perceives as the market demand, and gives him the best option to have a successful final product. I would like to point out that this, depending on the different commercial uses, commercial may or may not affect the overall traffic that much, depending on what goes.
I guess I'm going to ask the question kind of again, I know some of the residents had alternate drawings they, suggested, and one of them was just the two-story townhome thing. Why is that not a viable option?
The economics were not there for that. Construction costs and land costs are both too high that wouldn't be dense enough to provide the inflow to meet the cost to construct and own that.
To meet what?
To meet the cost to construct and own that type of property.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rosenberg, did you have questions?
Yeah, I just, if this is approved through us here at the Planning Commission as well as the council, what time frame are you looking at? Are you looking at construction to start next year, or are you still thinking this year for construction?
It's a bit of a sliding scale. The goal would be to start this year. With the approvals, the building permits, if it's too late in the year, maybe bid prices are too high and you wait to get more favorable bids over the winter for next spring. The goal would be to start construction this year, though I can't promise that it would happen.
Okay.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Of course, we can continue to discuss this among ourselves as wished. And I would ask that I think we don't want it, and well, I'll leave it up. Does the commission want to hear additional things from the neighbors? At this point, they have had their speaker, but we could allow additional testimony if we wanted to.
I think we could allow them. I would like.
Okay. Let's ask for max 1 minute each, and ideally new information since we've heard from you last time. Anybody who'd like to come forward?
I'm Mike Planton. I live at 6632 Stevens, and I just want to clarify the issue on the pork chop and the outcropping. We actually asked for it to be a dead end if possible, so we don't really care about getting into our neighborhood from there. We're fine with going around if it can prevent more traffic from being on our street. So I just wanted to clarify that from our group.
Thank you. 20 seconds, that's a record. Anybody else who'd like to make a brief comment?
I'm Kathy Bender, and I live at 6637 Stevens. And I want you to also remember the 66th Street is right at the end of our block as well as this. And I want you, and the roundabout, I think you really need to think about that. And again, the size. There's not enough green space.
Thank you.
I am Dean Gotti, which is at 6615. I am the house across the street from the driveway behind the building. Although it looks like on the sign that the headlights are going to go down the property line, I've never seen a headlight that will stretch out 300 to 400 feet that won't also go at least 50 to 75 feet wide. And those headlights will be going into my bedroom and into my living room, even if those cars turn left. I have 4-foot hedges out in front, but those things are coming down that driveway from 8 feet higher on the west side of that, on First Avenue, down to Stevens Avenue. So they're going to be going over the top of my hedges already. So I have a concern with the headlights, regardless of which way they turn. Also, I have a concern right now that the grass in those lots are already 8 inches to 12 inches tall. I put in a complaint on that a week ago, so this is the 5th day already. They still haven't been mowed. And I'm looking at least for another month or two to where that's going to be able to be cut and probably baled. It's going to be so high. Is there any concern that this is the type of neighborliness this project wants to have with us, that they aren't even mowing their lawns while we're working through this process? Thank you.
Could I ask you a brief question about your comments about the headlights? Was that pertaining to the residential exit from the garage below, or
my house is right across the street, almost from the one coming out from behind the building.
Okay.
So even though they're coming down that, and that they go straight down the property line, those headlights, if they're 50 to 75 feet wide, are still going to be hitting my house.
So, but it is, just to be clear, the commercial traffic or the surface parking lot traffic that's of concern to your house?
Whether it's commercial or whether it's residential or private cars, those headlights are still going to hit the house.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name's Tracy Satterland, and I live at 6628 Stevens. And my concern mainly is our working with the developer. I don't feel like they have taken any of our concerns or many of our concerns to heart. I'm hearing for the first time that they aren't going to do the pork chop. I feel like, I don't know, I don't have a whole lot of hope with what the outcome is going to be working with the developer with some of our concerns. I feel like we're being dismissed. And I guess I just would like a little more support and have some weight put behind the, I'll call it directive to work with the neighborhood. I really would like to see a partnership to come up with a better plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak briefly? Okay. So we can go back to sort of general discussion among the commission, or we could go straight to a motion, but given how much has happened here, I sort of hope we could have some general discussion of where people are at and what they're thinking. And just to remind you, sort of procedurally, we'll have two motions to make a decision on. The one will be the rezoning, and the second will be the PUD. And it would be possible with the PUD or the conditional use permit, the second motion, to apply some additional stipulations to recommend for that second motion. And that, yeah, staff?
Yep, Chair O'Leary, just a reminder, and Commissioner Quam had mentioned this, you know, as you get into making motions, if there are any amendments you'd like to see or stipulations to be worded differently, that's certainly your prerogative.
Thank you. And I think, yeah, it sounded like there were some ideas of maybe things people have in mind. But I guess so, if anybody would like to just say what they're generally thinking, if there are changes they'd like to see, if they're supportive or not.
I would like to see something that where we can get the developer and the immediate residents next to on the parking lot come together with something that works for both of them. I'm not real comfortable with the berm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be 5 years before anything becomes mature. I think it's going to be a disaster from the start on that part. That's a huge concern of mine.
Okay, so that would be specifically that south border fence or border buffer.
South border.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm also not super satisfied with the landscaping, and I realize there's been some difficulty with those hedges sort of encroaching on the property line of trying to put a fence on the property. But certainly if it were me to the south, I would prefer a fence. I would hope that they're able to work with the neighborhood preference. I think it's an option, of course, that we could specify a fence, but I also hear what staff had said about we want ideally an outcome that works, that they negotiate themselves.
I think we maybe should have something in there that, they negotiated with the two, maybe even with, I'm not sure if the staff can help. What the guidance is on that, what you did on Plaza 66, it doesn't have to be a fence, but as long as I think it's agreeable by both, I want to make sure that they're covered.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if I'm covering all the concerns on this, but for example, stating a requirement that there be 100% opacity at headlight height, that leaves it open to whether that opacity is met by a fence, by a rock wall, by a berm, by dense landscaping. So that would be one example.
And that would be a new item we'd have to add, or is that already in?
That would be kind of tweaking the language that's already in there.
Thank you. Any other general comments or discussion on the project?
I think just in general, headlight opacity at headlight height is probably going to require more trees unless you spade in very large trees. But again, the cost between, something that's 6 feet tall and spading in something, it's going to be a cost difference between like $2,000 and $5,000, just as an example, So, I mean, I don't know if we can specify, or it's on staff to specify the size or the scale, or you just have to go with opacity at headlight height because that's as far as our rules typically.
I don't know of a different way to get at that. I think what I'm hearing is that the landscape plan and materials plan that you're seeing leaves you with some concerns, and I definitely hear that it leaves the neighborhood with some concerns. Other than opacity, I can't think of a good measurement.
But then again, at that point, those changes would be reflected in the final vote for council, and they'll have a chance to address that, I guess, at the council vote. Is that correct?
I don't know that the developer would be able to come up with a revised landscape plan and site plan. It may still go, if your recommendation was 100% opacity, it might still just retain that wording at the council level without a site plan showing that. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think it does. Thank you.
It seems that from my understanding, the main light concern is the one gentleman on the east side. Is it an option to put some landscaping in his yard too, as part of the developer's expense?
You know, Matt.
Chair Haver-Leary, Commissioner Quam, the developer, Mr. Lynch, did mention that he would be willing to do that. Given that this approval, you know, refers to this property, I don't know legally that we can require something to happen on another property. Certainly, it's a proposal. I think we can. Do you have any thoughts on legally how we can require that? You know, certainly you expect that the developer follow through on that if it's an issue. There's a possibility of getting a right-of-way permit to put plantings in the right-of-way there, some low shrubs or something like that. That would happen in the first kind of 12 feet of the property in the boulevard space. Yeah, I guess all we can say is that the developer has indicated a willingness to explore that if headlights are an ongoing issue for that resident.
Additional comments, Commissioner Rosenberg?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the neighbors. I think that, you know, they've really shown a lot of good faith here and coming forward. A lot of things were brought up that really caused us all to think, and don't think for a minute we weren't hearing this. I do appreciate, you know, your participation. I also appreciate the developer for looking and taking these comments seriously that the residents have here. And if this goes forward, I really do want a partnership that the resident talked about. That's an important piece to all this, how this can all get together. If there are problems, you know, try to work it out, and so that we can, so this can be a cohesive neighborhood. That's what I heard over and over and over, that we are a neighborhood. We are proud of our neighborhood. This apartment complex, I think, can be a part of that neighborhood. Give it a chance. I am going to support this. I do think this is something that is reasonable for this neighborhood, but I encourage the neighbors that are there with the new neighbors to come in and work together, because you all have so much to give, and I really appreciate what I've heard.
Thank you. Additional comments?
I have
Commissioner Hallmark?
a couple. Yeah. So based on the last time the developer was here and where we are right now, the main changes that we've talked about have been changes to the landscaping.
Staff, would you say that's accurate, or are there additional changes that we want to note?
I think that's an accurate assessment, that the primary changes have been to that border, the southeastern quadrant of the property, with the additional landscaping facing Stevens Avenue in the boulevard area there to block headlights, as well as the change to the raised berm.
Because I do understand that the neighbors are not feeling heard. I don't feel like the developer has made significant changes other than adding some. I mean, there's been some changes made, but I don't feel like they're the changes that have been brought up in any meetings that they've had with the residents, according to what the residents are saying. Additionally, in the emails that we received in our packet, there were many suggestions that were not met, mainly the one being the townhomes, which I don't know if there's a way to get to a point where we can talk about that development and then take the townhome piece out of it, because it's going to be a mixed-use development with retail at this point. I mean, it seems like that's the path that we're taking, but I feel like there's actual things that could incorporate, like you were saying, this, Commissioner Rosenberg was saying, that could incorporate this into the neighborhood by focusing on a lot of smaller changes versus continuing to focus on townhomes. That is just my suggestion, because I feel like you know, that's how you and I even met, was working through some apartment issues. So I just feel like there's a way greater possibility for working together if we can agree at some point that this is going to be an apartment building there. And then just to clarify too, like, I do consider apartment buildings residential. So it's not necessarily single-family home, but it is a place where people reside, and they do consider that their homes. So I do just like to clarify that. And I do like to see, you know, lots of new kinds of housing coming into Richfield. I've been here, lived here for a really long time, but there's better work that can be done with the neighbors for sure on getting some changes other than shrubbery. So.
I just wanted to say in that regard, in terms of working with the neighborhood, going through the letter from ISG where they took the points sort of one by one from the neighborhood letter, and it was interesting to read because on the one hand I was a little bit frustrated because some of the responses felt a little bit dismissive or even kind of snarky. That was unfortunate. It didn't further anything. But in terms of what was actually changed, there are, you know, at least 3, 4, 5 items that are different or were already addressed in the original thing. Obviously, them changing it to townhomes is a huge change, and that would be a huge ask. And if it doesn't work, we can't make that happen. But so many of the other things, in terms of there not being large mechanicals on the roof, snow issues from the balconies, or explaining that, snow storage on the south of the site, improving this landscaping on the south, moving the driveway to the south. There have been a lot of these little changes, and I don't want to ignore that. Even though the relationship doesn't seem great, there still seem to be things moving forward in this regard. So that's encouraging to me. And I think it's important we work on these details, and there are good ideas, and I'm supportive especially of beefing up our condition for the south border area. But just like big picture, to think about what this project is and what this means, I think this is a really good and a really unique project. I think it's pretty unprecedented in terms of something that's occupying a really small site that's making a really good use of a small site, and I think that's important for Richfield in general. We've heard a lot, Penn Avenue and other locations, that the sites are too small, we can't do anything with them, they just need to sit vacant or sit in a low quality condition for decades until they can be consolidated. And this actually shows that one use, this church, can actually become something, become 33 homes to people, can become additional retail spaces, and I think that's important, and I think that's something I'm going to support, and I hope that we all support. And then just in terms of the number of rental units, because I just checked this number with staff today, in the year 2000 we added 138 rental units, and that's the property by the railroad tracks in 66th. Since the year 2000, it's been 18 years, we've added 94 units in that entire time. So we've built staggeringly little rental housing, and I think people are feeling that squeeze, renters are feeling that squeeze, and not being able to find a place to live, and prices going up, and so on. And I think getting more rental units is important. We have some other things in the works, but even earlier tonight, Lindale Gardens, we approved with a third as many rental units as was originally proposed. I think we need this housing, and I think this is a really good project to provide that housing and to improve this site. So I support it, and I also support improvements on the south edge to make that a little bit better. Any other additional comments?
Yeah, you know, I like the idea of the south edge, but I also like I really wish that, the developer had a chance to work out many more things. And you're right, some of the things did seem a little bit dismissive, which really left a bad taste in my mouth on that. And, I think they really got more work to do before they would get to the council, and I'm not sure they're there yet.
Any other discussion, or?
Well, a month ago, I'm very impressed also by the residents' engagement, and I'm a believer in that's the community's biggest asset, is consistent engagement in our policy making and being here and everything. I've studied this a lot in the last month. We're not taking it lightly at all, and I'm, all things considered, that church moved out of there almost 5 years ago. I think it could be a real positive. I don't think it's viable to put townhomes on there. It sounds like that's not financially viable. So I've come the other way after studying it further. I've driven over there several times, and I'm going to be supportive of it.
Yeah, I think just in short, I mean, I'll echo your sentiments about that. I think I've thought long and hard about this since the last meeting, and I went into the last meeting thinking I was just gonna be like, yeah, great, more development, go Richfield. And then after hearing all the residents' comments, I was like, I thought long and hard about this, and I thought about what it meant in the context of the future of Richfield, the future of the area, the future of the hub, and I think a lot of this, to me, after going through how we've just set up the framework in general for a developer to come in, and we set the guidelines for the property, and and they try to hit those targets. It's, if we go shooting down developments that are on county roads on major thoroughfares all the time, it's going to signal to other developers that, no, I don't want to come in and do Penn Avenue. No, I don't want to come in and do these other areas. And I'm not for rubber stamping density, but at the same time, I really think to make the hub successful, in my mind, this is the biggest thing, is that in order to make the hub successful, you need high quality density around the hub area. You can't just say we're going to redevelop the hub and hope it all turns out. Like, you need people there who are willing to participate and purchase and actively live in the hub area once it does kind of slowly come to fruition. And I think this is one of the first steps. And I think this is, I think the developer has, gone beyond what I've seen other developers do. And I'm, I will give them that at least. And I think it's, they could have just come in here and said, I met all your requirements and here we go. And so I think I'm inclined to, vote yes and approve these as they stand, with the added language on the, working with them for the screening. Especially, neighbors across the street too. Again, we can't legally compel somebody to plant across the street where it's not directly adjacent to the property. But, if in good faith they could find a way to do that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Chair Hafer O'Leary,
Yep.
Commissioners, on that note, thank you for coming back to that, Commissioner Pinn. We discussed it a little bit, and if the commission was inclined, go ahead and put that motion in to require headlight screening on the property or adjacent to the property across the street. And you can recommend that motion in. We'll run it by the city attorney to check out the legalities of it, but certainly feel free, if it's the commission's prerogative, to include that amended motion.
How would we word it as far as the screening to the properties to the south? Would that need to be a second motion to that as well?
I think for the properties to the south, we probably just want to strengthen the language, strengthen or modify the language in the condition that's in the resolution right now. So it currently reads, continue to discuss landscaped berm design, including the possibility of installing a fence in addition to plantings. And I think the best course of action there is probably just to strengthen that to specify that it provide 100% screening to 4 foot height above headlight level. I mean, that is what the city code says already. That is the requirement, 100% screening. But we can certainly, just be very specific in that motion there.
And procedurally, whoever makes the motion could just include that in the original motion.
Any other additional comments, questions, or would somebody like to make a motion? And again, we have two. One will be the rezoning, and the second will be the PUD.
Can we also put in the motion that the work planning session is happening before the next vote?
So the work session is scheduled for June 12th, which is timed with the first rezonings have to be read by the city council twice. So the work session is scheduled June 12th to time up with that first reading. And then there would be the final city council meeting would be 2 weeks later on June 26th.
Okay.
But are you asking that it be a requirement that a work session take place?
Definitely before.
Yeah, and I think one would, a work session could happen, I think regardless, to allow the neighbors to have, further dialogue with the city council I think regardless of if the developer or certainly I'm sure they can find a representative to attend.
Okay, thank you.
I think I could support that with those three things in there, you know, to protect the neighbors. I really want to make sure that happens.
Okay, so our first item is again, a motion to recommend approval of rezoning from single-family residential to planned mixed use. Does anybody want to make that motion?
I motion to recommend approval of rezoning the subject property from single-family residential to planned mixed use.
Do we have a second? Any discussion of that item? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So the next one would be to recommend approval of a PUD, conditional use permit, and final development plan for mixed-use development. So if somebody would like to make a motion with additional conditions, they could do so, or it could be done as an amendment to the motion.
And can we state those additional conditions one more time so we have a
Yeah.
accurate motion?
Commissioner Rudolph, would you like to make that motion, or would you prefer to do that as an amendment?
So I would like to make a motion to add the screening.
So sorry, procedurally, you would need to recommend approval, motion to recommend approval with those additions, or somebody else would need to do it and you'd need to make an amendment.
Write down what additional ones we have, and then we'll make sure that we have it squared away.
So I'll make a motion to approve the
PUD.
PUD with an amendment with these three things, which are that the work session happens before the first, before the first council meeting coming up, and then the additional landscaping on the neighbor's lawn.
The additional screening to the east?
To the east, yeah.
And the 100% opacity on the fence? Or on the south border?
Yes.
So, okay, so we have,
Say that again.
Well, so 100% opacity as well as an agreement between the residents and the developer for what that means.
okay,
Maybe I suggest on the screening to the east on the neighboring property, just saying that would be contingent on city attorney feedback.
Commissioner Hobart, are you agreeable to that? You did make the motion, right?
Yes, I did make that motion, and I am agreeable to that.
Okay, so, and then do we have a second on that motion? I apologize.
Second.
Okay, so, staff, could you read back the motion just so we're clear?
So there was a motion to get back to the original motion. Motion to approve the planned unit development, conditional use permit, and final development plan with the additional conditions that a work session be held before the first reading of rezoning, that screening, that landscaping screening be installed on the east side of Stevens Avenue, and we would further specify that could take place either in the right-of-way on public property or in the neighbor's yard, whatever is their preference, contingent on city attorney review. And then finally, that the buffer to the south include 4-foot-tall, 100% opacity screening in addition to the planned landscaping, whether that be additional landscaping or fencing.
Okay, and so that moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of that motion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. All right, thank you for coming again. And all right, so our next item would be consideration of the approval of a resolution finding that the acquisition and disposition by the Housing and Redevelopment Authority of 1430 East 66th Street for eventual redevelopment as commercial use is consistent with the Richfield Comprehensive Plan. Staff.
Thank you, Chair Hayfoot O'Leary and Commissioners. The property located at 1430 66th Street East has been vacant since 2015. Prior to that point, the building on the property operated as the El Jalapeno Market since approximately 2000. Prior to that, it was a Kenny's Market convenience grocery store. Property was foreclosed on in 2015, and the ownership eventually reverted to its primary lender, the Richfield Bloomington Credit Union. Since that time, the credit union has been attempting to sell the property. Despite lowering the price of the property below its appraised value, the credit union has been unable to sell it. As a vacant property, code violations occur regularly, especially dumping. The condition of the building, even while it was open and operational, was poor, and it has fallen into a further state of disrepair since. While the building is secured, there is potential for persons to enter the building and harm themselves, especially since there's a large hole in the floor. The Housing and Redevelopment Authority staff negotiated a purchase of the building in April, and the HRA entered into a purchase agreement on May 21st, 2018. This agreement is contingent on the outcome of the Planning Commission action tonight. If purchased, the building on the property would be demolished within 90 days. Staff would then market the property as a redevelopment site, which could possibly include a shared parking arrangement with the adjoining Frenchman's Pub. The city's purchases require a finding of consistency with the comprehensive plan by the Planning Commission. Staff believes that the purchase of this property is consistent with both the 2008 comprehensive plan, which designates the property as office, and the currently proposed 2040 comprehensive plan update, which designates the property as community commercial. With that, I would stand for any questions you might have.
Any questions for staff? No? All right, does anybody want to make a motion on this item?
Well, I will move to approve the attached resolution finding that the acquisition and disposition by the Housing and Redevelopment Authority of 1430 66th Street East for eventual redevelopment as commercial use is consistent with the Richfield Comprehensive Plan.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I think this is a great idea, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. So next we have liaison reports. Community Services Commission. Okay, City Council.
The only thing to report is that we have a mayor candidate, Maria Reagan, Maria, what's her last?
Gonzalez.
Gonzalez. Gonzalez.
Gonzalez. Why did I forget that? And she's going to be running for mayor, and Mary Supple's running for at-large. Haven't heard anybody else. Does anybody know anything else? No. So that's all I have to report for the. Maybe next time I'll remember their names. It's late.
Nothing to report?
HRA, yeah, they purchased agreed on a property to purchase at 1430 66th Street, as well as they forgave a loan for a resident that had passed, which is really heartfelt in them doing that.
Transportation Commission, they recommended a layout for Lyndale Avenue at the last meeting, so that's a big step moving forward, and I don't know what the status is with that at the council right now, but would be 2-3 lanes all the way through. There are 3 additional proposed roundabouts that would go in south of 66th. Some additional on-street parking in the downtown area, which should be pretty nice, and bike lanes throughout the corridor. So it's a really nice project that's coming together. Chamber of Commerce, I don't think we have a liaison for that. All right, City Planner report.
I don't think we have anything additional at this time, other than that there will be a work session on June 12th related to the project.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.